Hi everybody, so we'll go live in now 1 minute. You must be able to see my screen right now. So in 1 minute we'll go live and good luck one more time. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the webinar Powering WASH Renewable Energy for Water Supply in Humanitarian Settings. My name is Ranisha Basnit and today I'll be moderating this webinar along with my colleague Lisa Feldman from Energypedia. As you know, this webinar is a joint collaboration between ICRC, UNITA and Energypedia and is a part of an ongoing webinar series. I invite you to have a look at all our past webinars where we have touched upon different issues or topics within the humanitarian energy nexus. So please do click on this link and check out those past webinars. And we will share with you the presentation from today's webinar as well as these links in a follow-up email so that you can have access to those documents. So before starting the webinar, a quick tip. On the right side of your screen, you should be able to see either a control panel where you have the option called questions. If you don't see this control panel, you should be able to see an icon, like an orange icon. When you click on this, it will expand into a control panel, and there you have the option called questions. So please use this option to send in your questions. We will collect all your questions during the webinar and then address them to the respective speaker during the question and answer so during the Q&A round. So please do send us your question and also do tell us to whom the question is addressed to. You can either write the organization or speaker 1, speaker 2 so that we know to whom to forward it to. So let's kickstart the webinar by knowing a little bit more about you, the audience. So a poll question will now pop up on your screen. So quick second, it's taking a bit to, yeah. So now the poll question is on your screen. So please do tell us, where are you tuning in today from? Are you tuning in from Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America? So this is to understand where are our audience coming from and to understand you guys better. So I see answers are coming in, so I will leave it for, let's say, a few more seconds. And maybe another few more seconds. And now I'll close the poll and display the results. So today we have a lot of our audience tuning in from Europe, followed by Africa and Asia. Welcome to all of you one more time. So now I have a second poll question for you popping up on your screen. So please tell us, in which sector do you work? Are you mostly working in the energy sector or the humanitarian sector, the WASH sector or research institute? So I'm going to again leave the poll for a few more seconds because I can see the answers coming in. So maybe another few more seconds. And now I will quickly close the poll and then display the results. So we have a lot of our audience who are working in the humanitarian sector, followed by research institutes, WASH and energy. So I hope this webinar will be useful and relevant to all of you. So now I'll quickly close the poll results. And now coming back to our webinar, so I want to quickly run through the agenda for today. Today we have a brief introduction on the topic COVID and the WASH by our colleague from ICRC. Then we have 2 case studies from UNICEF and then ICRC, and then another case study from our colleagues from Renewable. So moving forward, I would like to invite our first presenter for today, Marco Albertini. Marco has more than 15 years of experience in the international development sector, and today he's going to briefly introduce or talk about the interlinkage between COVID-19 and WASH. Marco, the floor is yours, so please unmute yourself and start the talk.
Thank you, Ranisha, for your introduction and for allowing me today to open this important event. We are already at the 4th month of the response to the COVID-19 crisis, and since beginning, many things have changed. We have seen entire countries in isolation, disruption of international flights, impact on economies. However, during this same period, not a single conflict has stopped because of the pandemic. Humanitarian crisis continued, and for many, unfortunately, these crises come as an additional emergency on top of pre-existing emergencies. In many of the contexts where we work as a humanitarian agency, essential services for water, sanitation, healthcare were already disrupted or very weak before. Even the basic recommendation on sanitation and hygiene, the WASH practices as a main barriers to COVID-19 spread in preventive care, are a challenge for millions of people still lacking access to safe water and proper sanitation services. So there are many reasons for this dramatic situation, but one of the main causes is often linked to the possibility of powering up those services. Energy is needed for pumping stations, treatment plants, construction of new infrastructures, as well as for continuously operating these services. Being these centralized large-scale infrastructure in urban areas managed by water utilities or smaller decentralized solutions managed by communities. In any case, a reliable, affordable, and sustainable power supply is essential. So on one side, many are still focusing on the immediate effects of the crisis with an emergency healthcare approach, but we cannot avoid looking at the secondary effects that the crisis is creating on public services, in particular in this situation where systems were already weak and insufficient. So in fragile context, socio-economic effects are also impacting. And if we look at the loss of income sources on the side of the users and their capacity to sustain the cost of water and power supply bills, or the interruption of supply of equipment and materials to utilities to run preventive maintenance, we can clearly see that COVID-19 crisis is not only a health crisis. So I link to say here that investing on power supply is necessary today to activate healthcare, water, sanitation services, and to allow them to continue functioning with equitable access for everyone, in particular at this difficult time. Water pumping and sanitation services through renewable power supply make water utilities and communities more resilient to situations like COVID-19 because they can allow uninterrupted access to basic essential services when they are most needed. So the technology is mature, it's present in all countries where we operate, it is affordable in terms of operating costs, and as we will see in the presentations today, simple and accessible enough to be maintained also at community level. So before closing, I would like to mention one document called COVID-19 and WASH, Mitigating the Socio-Economic Impacts of the Water and Sanitation and Hygiene Sector, that we at the ICRC co-signed together with UNICEF, the Global WASH Cluster, and other important NGOs. It is an advocacy document and a call for immediate collective and strategic action by national governments, service providers, and humanitarian agencies to continue investing on the delivery of essential water services, and I add here, including power supply as their main enabler, WASH services for all, in particular the most vulnerable. You will find a link to the document on the Energipedia website with the rest of the webinar materials after this call. I will close here my intervention, and I'm now looking forward to hearing from today's speakers and from the webinar participants. Thank you all, and back to you, Ranisha.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you also for highlighting it again, that how access to energy is heart of every intervention, especially in the WASH. So moving forward, I would like to invite our second presenter for today, Asinath Kiprono from Oxfam. Asinath is a water and solar specialist working with Oxfam, and today she's going to talk about the Global Solar and Water Initiative and also give an overview on lessons learned. Asinath, the floor is yours. So if you could quickly unmute yourself and start the talk.
Thank you, Ranisha. I will begin by giving a short introduction to use of solar for water supply in humanitarian settings. Traditionally, humanitarian operations have been reliant on diesel for fuel for water supply. And some years back, there was a realization that there was a need to adopt a different way of supplying water in humanitarian settings. Generators were expensive to run and were coupled with other challenges of fuel theft and fuel mismanagement. The wave of using solar power for water supply started in Dadaab, where humanitarian donors such as ECHO give funds towards the solarization of water systems. And Dadaab eventually became the first refugee camp to be supplying water using 100% either solar or hybrid system. But there were factors that were hampering wider scale up across different regions in the world. And so the Global Solar and Water Initiative was formed to address these gaps. And we were funded by ECHO for the first 2 years. And then OFDA / USAID then funded us for another 2 years. And we are in that current phase that is funded by OFDA. What were the gaps that were recognized at that time? And I'll just highlight some of the key ones. There was severe shortage of energy expertise in the humanitarian sector. There was lack of guidance and policy detailing the circumstances that are favorable for solar pumping. There was also a lack of tools and standards that humanitarian actors could be able to use to gauge solar options. And there were a lot of misconceptions around solar, such as solar is expensive and solar is limited in capacity. So what is our role? The Global Solar and Water Initiative is co-managed by IOM and Oxfam. And our overarching aim is to mainstream the use of solar for water supply by promoting solar water pumping and supporting its quality implementation. And we do this through a number of activities. And in brief, we operate a technical helpline through which we address technical queries from humanitarian and development WASH actors. We also share knowledge through various coordination groups and WASH clusters at global, regional, and country levels. We build evidence and develop knowledge material, which we avail to the sector for using to design and implement solar pumping solutions. And we also provide field support through country visits. And lastly, we do capacity building to WASH agencies. What is the current situation right now with regard to solar water pumping? Since those early days of the Dadaab, there has been a general move of WASH implementers in humanitarian settings to adopt solar for water supply with support from coordinating agencies and donors. If I may use Uganda as an example, in the middle of a humanitarian situation in 2017, with a new influx of refugees from South Sudan to the West Nile, organizations were adopting solar for water use as a solution for water supply, even in the first phase of an emergency. This continued with hundreds of solar pumping systems being installed across refugee camps in Uganda. The Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh is another good example of solar water pumping use in an ongoing humanitarian crisis, where, if I may just use one example, a solar water pumping system that is supplying water to 50,000 people using solar alone was installed in 2019. And the solar team provided support in these cases. And there are many other good examples across refugee and ATP settings in the world. Next slide, please. Why solar? What are the benefits of solar and why is it relevant for using water supply? Solar is cost effective, it's durable, it's sustainable, as many of us know, humanitarian funding is front-loaded, and so we have to try as much as possible to put measures in place to reduce recurrent costs, and solar provides such a solution. Solar also improves water service levels. When a solar water pumping system is well planned and implemented, it provides reliable water. As long as the sun is shining, then water can be pumped, unlike diesel solutions or grid power, which, like for example, diesel solutions are expensive, and there is erratic fuel supply in some cases, and in other cases, it's difficult to deliver the fuel to sites. And then it also increases affordability of water at rural community level. Since solar is free, has zero operating cost and very minimal maintenance cost, it contributes towards cheaper water. And we have seen rural communities that have halved the price of water upon installation of a solar water pumping system. Solar is also environmentally friendly, does not emit any pollutants, and so it can be used for combating climate change. And it also runs quietly, and so it's not a noise nuisance to the users. And then finally, organizations can also capitalize on solar to set targets for achievement of a greener agenda and contribute towards a greener planet. Next. What are the enabling factors for solar-powered water supply? Reduction in solar PV prices has been the greatest enabler, as it has made solar affordable. And we say the solar prices have actually reduced by tenfold since about a decade ago. Then many countries also have a renewable energy policy that supports and encourages solar use for water supply. There is also high constant solar irradiation in most humanitarian settings, and this also supports application of solar for water supply. Then world over, the technology has evolved and is now a robust and reliable technology. And we also have a private sector that is booming, even in developing countries. And this private sector has quality products and is able to support implementation of even large projects. Next. Other factors that support use of solar-powered water supply. Sometimes delivery of fuel is difficult in some locations. For example, South Sudan, where fuel is airlifted even to the camps there. Some locations are inaccessible due to insecurity. Other locations are cut off when it rains or it snows in the winter. Some countries experience fuel shortages. And other countries have a grid, but the grid is unreliable, such as Lebanon and Iraq. Next. Some of the lessons some of our findings and lessons as we have done, and we have managed the Global Solar and Water Initiative for the last, say, 4 years. Solar is suitable in long-term displacement settings, such as refugee camps, IDP camps. Refugee camps on record has an average life of 18 years. And so solar-powered water supply is suitable because you have a lot of cost saving by adopting solar-powered water supply. Solar-powered water pumping can also be applied during camp setup or even the first phase of an emergency. And you don't need to wait many years to start thinking about using solar. At host community level or at rural community level, a cost recovery plan should be put in place to support potential costs in case the system requires repair. Solar is reliable and it's robust, and where failure has been experienced, the failure was not related to the technology, but it was due to issues that are common with other pumping schemes. Issues such as incorrect sizing. And then we have also found that a knowledgeable private sector is present in most countries, and so large projects can be implemented. Next, please. Also, when it comes to implementation, implementers should pay attention to after-sales support. and ensure success in the critical first 18 to 24 months of the system by ensuring there's an after-sales support plan to support the system. And then they should also opt to use quality and known products so that there is ease of service. Next. We have also developed technical resources to support implementers in implementing quality solar pumping systems. One of them is a solar pumping toolkit that is available to all WASH actors, and it is accessible on energypedia.info. You just search solar pumping, and then it's also available on oxfamwash.org. Next. We have recently written a book on solar water pumping that will be published in a month or so, and this will also be available for free to all humanitarian and development WASH actors. Next. We have also developed an online course on solar water pumping, and this course is currently available for access. We are also developing a website that will collect knowledge, material, documents, evaluations on solar water pumping. And we also expect to go into a third phase of the project, and we will continue, of course, to operate the technical helpline that is open to all humanitarian and development organizations. And our contacts are on the next slide. And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Astinet. That was a nice overview to this how the viability of solar water pumping for powering water. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A, the chat box on the side, and do type in your questions. We will address them to all the speakers towards the end. And now, moving forward, I would like to welcome my the third presenter for today, Sylvia Gaia. Sylvia is the Senior Advisor on Water and Environment for UNICEF headquarters. And today, Sylvia is joined by her colleague, Fiona Ward, who is also working as a WASH specialist at UNICEF. And Sylvia and Fiona both will present on UNICEF's use of solar-powered water systems in WASH. Sylvia, please unmute yourself and proceed with the presentation.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Can you check that? Can I check that you are hearing me? Hello?
Yes, we hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for inviting us to be part of this webinar today, and very pleased to explain a little bit the experience of UNICEF in the area of solar-powered water systems in our humanitarian programs. If you will go to the next slide, you will see that UNICEF normally every year we spend like around $1 billion US per year, and half of it is expenditure that relates with humanitarian assistance. Yeah, we work in more than 100 countries, and we have almost 800 staff, water and sanitation and hygiene staff over all these countries. When we look at the operations in terms of and the results that we are getting every year in terms of solar powered systems, mainly for water supplies, but we have also some interventions in water treatment plants, you will see that here the distribution of the main countries and regions that are basically using the solar energy as a way to run the water systems. Nigeria alone is doing a lot, has done a lot last year, followed by Yemen, Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Mauritania. You can see here a little bit the distribution, but this is to say that across all the countries that are using solar, there is a bunch of 10, 15 countries that are doing most of the work. In the next slide, you will see that in terms of last year's results, only last year UNICEF installed almost 1,300 solar powered systems across 40 countries. This is the results only in 2019. And this kind of intervention covers not only the water supply for communities or for IDP camps, but also we are trying as much as possible to connect schools, healthcare facilities, and also see if we can promote the multi-use system so that other activities, and particularly small-scale livelihoods, can be done using the same water supply. Overall, UNICEF works on energy, using solar energy in 63 countries. This is if we count not only WASH, but if we include also the education and the health sectors that are doing a lot of efforts on that area too, together with WASH, and also because UNICEF is under a process of trying to solarize compounds, warehouses, and offices as much as possible. If you see the pie distribution, you will see that most of the water supply systems go and relates to providing water to communities. But you see that there are other connections with the schools, healthcare facilities, and other uses which are important also. And you see where the main humanitarian programs using solar are around the different countries where we work. However, the next slide, I would like to focus on a couple of places. I'm going to talk about the experience that we have in Yemen and in Gaza. It started by Yemen, which has a very large, not only for that last year, but in the last few years, it has a very large interventions using solar energy. And this started a little bit as a fuel exit strategy and try to look for renewable and more sustainable sources of energy in 2016. This was the case in Yemen for UNICEF, yeah, for the operations that we were having there. It started very much in the rural areas. Also regarding challenges to access deeper aquifers that with the traditional hand pumps were a little bit more challenging to get. But we rapidly saw that the success of using solar energy in rural areas could be really scale up and being brought to the urban settings, incorporating all the lessons that we learn working and operating in rural areas. Therefore, in 2018, a study was done, a technical study, a feasibility study on use of the solar in different locations in Yemen. And this was designed in a way that normally the systems are hybrid systems that use maybe a part of electricity, a part of fuel, and a part of solar, trying to reduce the dependence of other sources of energy that are not, let's say, that are less sustainable, right? In 2019, UNICEF Yemen installed 187 systems, including big projects that were done in partnerships with World Bank, KfW, DFID, and Qatar Foundation, among others. And one of the largest projects was in Sana'a City, where we targeted 17 water sources. Other partners like UNOPS and ICRC also were doing the same in other water sources available, and this resulted in providing water to 1.5 million people in the city using this hybrid approach. As a result of this experience that we have had across the years in a country like Yemen, the Ministry of Water and Environment adopted this as a national approach, and this is one of the things that Marco said at the beginning on the potential for a scale up, and once this is demonstrated and governments adopt this as a main approach, is where the potential of the scale up is really unlocked, no, and allows for a lot of additional interventions. So this is an important part of the things that UNICEF does together with the ministries to really move into the direction of adopting these as a national strategies and national approaches. UNICEF implements these projects or these activities in a different ways. We can implement with the government partners, with NGO partners, and sometimes directly is directly done by UNICEF. And we also have explored a long time different approaches for the technical operation and maintenance of these systems. That can be, of course, different when it comes to rural, where we normally tend to have smaller scale private operators running the operation and maintenance, while in urban areas, this normally relies on the utilities. So all this work is not only about making the capital investment for the solar, but also all the work of putting the right models for operating and maintenance is really important to assure the sustainability on the long term. We have a lot of challenges, and I am going to address them in the following slides, but I wanted to mention that conflict areas are a very big challenge. Sometimes airstrikes can hit the system. This was the case that happened in Yemen, where a project was targeted by an airstrike and was destroyed, but this have been repaired and is now functional by today. The following slide, which is around the next slide, please. Yes, on this one is the case on Gaza. You all know that in Gaza there is a lot of difficulties also operating systems, particularly when there is a lot of dependence on fuel or electricity, because there are a lot of cuts. And therefore, UNICEF started the construction in Gaza of the first phase of this desalinization plant that you have in the picture from an aerial view, producing 6,000 cubic meters per day and reaching 75,000 people. And this is being expanded now to 20,000 cubic meters for a total of 250,000 people. At the first phase, the solar panels were installed on the roof of the building, and then solar fields were added to supply more electricity demand for running the plant in the phase one. Of course, when we installed this solar system, it was a huge reduction in fuel consumptions and electricity, so the costs were very much reduced. And this allow us to be less dependent on this electricity supply. As I said, there is a lot of shortage in the Gaza Strip, and also face some logistical challenges around importing fuel in this area. As you know, it's very difficult to get things in. So as I said, this is a hybrid approach because there are no batteries used, so that there is need to rely on generators and on electricity when there is no solar energy heating the panels. During this operation with diesel generators, we had a phenomenon called total harmonic distortion that was observed and really challenged the functioning of the plant and required that experts went and approached the country to see how to solve that, and this was solved. But this is to say that some of the big challenges that we have been facing on the ground. Other solar fields are being installed during this operation, and also, as I said, a wastewater treatment plant. This is also not only the case in Gaza. We operate with wastewater treatment plants in countries like Iraq, and there are other projects that, if time would allow, I will explain to cover on the operations that we have in drought-prone areas and other emergency contexts. The next slide. Is just to explain a little bit and very quickly the challenges that we have and the lessons learned. In terms of challenges, as I said, it's very difficult to really do the right things if we don't have enough capacity in our own staff or in the sector in which we operate. And sometimes the markets are having low quality products or low solar service products. So we have a lot of challenges in procurement. And of course, as I said, the embargoes, the restrictions, etc. We have learned that multi-use systems improve the level of services, that we can improve really the service delivery model because it's much more professional, using a smaller scale operators or working with the utilities for the operation and maintenance. We have learned about the importance of the enabling environment factors. Countries like Mauritania would have put really a lot of processes in place and building blocks in place in the whole sector to make the solar really successful experience, and opportunities to combine with different approaches. In the final slide, which is the next one, I just wanted to say very quickly that thanks to the partnerships that we have with very, very expert partners like Water Mission International, of course, we work very closely with Oxfam and with IOM in a lot of initiatives, has allowed us to put in place a plan to go through online training courses that we are doing with Water Mission. A solar hub that was has been put in Western Central Africa to cover the needs for those countries on technical assistance, and other long-term agreements that we have with organizations to cover for self-contained units, as the ones that you see here. And under development, we have some products, solar manuals and advanced solar course that will be provided by the late of this year, and in future. Bottleneck analysis, assessments, and different financing mechanisms that we are going to explore. So this is what I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you very much, and looking forward for the questions. And Fiona will be here to help us on the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvia, for highlighting your experiences from Yemen and Gaza. And I can see we have a lot of questions coming in. So one request to our attendees: please type to whom the question is addressed to. You can write a speaker 1, speaker 2, so that it is easy for us to address it to this respective speaker. And moving forward, I would like to invite Melissa Bonjo from ICRC. Melissa has more than 10 years of experience in international development, working in Zimbabwe, Nigeria, South Sudan, and now Syria. And today she is going to present her experience from Juba, South Sudan. Melissa, the floor is yours, and we can begin with the presentation. Melissa, you have muted yourself, so could you please unmute yourself?
Thank you, Ranisha. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well in this 4th month of the COVID pandemic and humanitarian response. My name is Melissa Bonzo. I'm connected today from homes in Syria, but I will present a case study from Juba, South Sudan, that I managed for 2 years between 2017 and 2019. The presentation will start from a general description of the humanitarian situation in South Sudan in the frame of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will look at the ICRC response in Juba for the component of access to essential services as water supply, for which power supply is an enabler. One of the proposed solutions in this context is the construction of solar-powered water yards, and we'll look at their technical design, cost of construction, operating costs, and organization of communities for the operation and maintenance. Finally, we will hear from a water committee member, Mr. Lomi Lang, in a short interview that was recorded a few days ago on the use of solar water yards. In South Sudan, it's a country of 11 million people, out of which, according to UN OCHA figures for May 2020, 7.5 million people need humanitarian assistance. This is because of years of conflict, violence, and underdevelopment of services. According to the UNICEF WASH report for 2019, there is 41% coverage of water and 11% for sanitation nationally. In this context, COVID-19 pandemic is an emergency that could further deteriorate the humanitarian situation. Water, sanitation, and hygiene activities are one of the pillars for the humanitarian response in this complex situation, where the implementation of simple preventative measures such as self-isolation and hand washing can be a challenge. In the next slide, we speak of power supply. The ICRC in South Sudan today is responding to COVID-19 as part of its response in prisons, health facilities, IDP camps, as well as for the general population requiring access to essential services. In a context where power supply from the grid is almost non-existent, with only 1% of the population having access to electricity, none of the activities would be possible without including a solution for power supply at the onset of any response. The government of South Sudan and the African Development Bank are upgrading the power distribution system with 20,000 domestic and commercial consumers planned. Traditionally, in emergency situations, the instinct is to use generators for powering any intervention. However, with the recurring emergencies such as cholera and now with COVID-19, this approach in the long term is not sustainable. The idea of constructing off-grid water points, initially like in Yemen, started in the rural areas but is now being adopted in urban areas. In the last years, Juba City is facing unprecedented population growth with people coming from different parts of the country and neighboring countries. The estimated population of Juba is 403,000 people, but it's probably underestimated. This increase in population exerts a lot of pressure on existing infrastructure, especially for water supply. During the cholera outbreak in 2016-2018, ICRC responded by water tracking, hand pump rehabilitation, and borehole drilling within the most affected communities in and around Juba City. After the outbreak was over, ICRC aimed for a more sustainable, medium-term solution, less dependent on fuel for power supply, to reach a higher number of people and to reduce the risk of cholera and now COVID in the future. This became more important when only 60 out of the 600 water tankers that sell water had access to fuel during this time. And so how did we manage to identify the communities where we should install solar water yards? We designed a decision-making mechanism to identify the most vulnerable communities to assist with solar water yards. This approach was supported by a detailed epidemiological study where the cases of waterborne diseases recorded in the 15 primary healthcare centers under Juba City Council were linked to a specific geographical area. This meant that the communities with the highest number of cases would be the most vulnerable and therefore they needed more assistance. We also identified the number of water facilities in all these communities in Juba and their status. Are they functioning or are they not functioning? And this is being developed into an online map. It's important to know that as of December 2019, of the 335 water points in Juba, 175 are functioning. And of these that are powered by generators, they are not functioning because the community cannot afford the fuel for the generators. In this slide, we see the different interventions presented. And it's important to note that they are complementary and they are in parallel. The short-term intervention is a mass water treatment and distribution through water tracking in an emergency, such as cholera and now possibly in COVID-19. The medium term is the construction of the off-grid solar-powered water yards, and the long term is the construction of a new water treatment plant that has the capacity to treat 500 cubic meters of water each hour. In terms of the medium and long-term solution, sustainability of operations is important, and we'll see in the next slide how solar power is key for communities to be able to organize themselves and afford the maintenance costs. In 2019, 3 boreholes drilled by the ICRC during the cholera outbreak with a yield greater than 5 cubic meters per hour were upgraded from a hand pump to a large solar water yard. The advantages of the solar water yards in comparison to the hand pumps are there's a significant increase in the number of beneficiaries. For the 3 water points I'm mentioning, they now serve approximately 15,600 people. The collection of water does not require the beneficiary to exert a lot of energy in the manual pumping from a hand pump, which normally is a very difficult task. Each of the solar water yards is connected to between 2 and 4 so-called water kiosks. Each water kiosk has 4 taps, and this allows between 8 to 16 people to collect water at the same time. The kiosks are constructed as far as 400 meters from the water tower, and this reduces the distance that people walk to collect water. The use of solar water for water yards also reduces the cost of water for the neighboring communities. This is because water tankers can fill water at the solar water yard and travel a short distance to the neighboring communities to sell the water. This and the above points are important considering that it's mostly women and children who are involved in water collection. In the next slide, you can see on your left, there's a graph showing the variation of the water supply for each month of the year and then for the different hours of the day. In the months between May and August, which is the rainy season in Juba, the water supply reduces by as much as 55% because of the cloud cover. In contrast, when the community uses the generator for their water supply and they don't have any fuel, then they don't get any water from their water point. In Rumbek, South Sudan, ICRC provided a solar system to water yard serving 15,000 people because the community could not afford to pay for the water to run the generator. It's important to note that the design of the solar water yard is based on the yield of the borehole. In this instance, we have 3 designs. For a borehole with a yield between 1 and 2.6 cubic meters per hour, you will have a 10 cubic meter tank at a height of 4 meters with a maximum of 2 kiosks. For a borehole with a yield between 5 and 10 cubic meters per hour, you will have a 27 cubic meter tank at a height of 6 meters with a maximum of 4 kiosks. For a borehole with a yield greater than 10 cubic meters per hour, you will have a 48 cubic meter tank at a height of 6 meters with a maximum of 4 kiosks. The number of beneficiaries is calculated at 20 liters per person per day. This amount is based on the FAIR standards of a minimum of 15 liters per person per day. It's also based on the amount of water that can be extracted from the borehole without affecting the aquifer, and also the quantity of water that is affordable for one family in June. If we look at the costs of construction of the water yard, its main components are the water storage tank, the pump and its accessories that include the solar panel, the kiosk and the filling station, the pipeline, and the security fence. The 10 cubic meter design costs approximately $5,400. The 27 cubic meter design costs $68,100, and the 48 cubic meter design costs $76,800. What's important to note is that these costs do not include the drilling of the borehole, which is approximately $77 per meter. In terms of the operational costs, which are the next slide, the community basically decides together how much they're going to charge for the water. This is to ensure that all the community members can afford the water. On average, each family spends $1 each month on water. If I use Gudele Block 7 as a case, that has 700 families benefiting from the solar water yard, they're collecting $500 per month. Therefore, in 1 year, they will collect $6,000. So the rate of return on investment will be 11 and a half years. However, if the management system becomes more efficient and they collect $1 from the 700 families who benefit from the solar yard, the rate of return will be reduced to 8 years. The operational costs and the level of data that is collected for each solar water yard, it varies from one community to another. The main expenses, however, are the salaries for the kiosk operators, the replacement of taps, and for communities that have a generator for the rainy season, fuel and maintenance. On average, the cost of operation without the generator and fuel is $80 per month. Generally, sustainability is one of the major challenges for construction projects in South Sudan. The main reason is the lack of financial resources, including power supply, and the absence of dedicated and qualified staff. For the ICRC-assisted large solar water yards, the asset-based community development ABCD approach was implemented to tackle this challenge. The official handover of the large solar water yard marks the end of the responsibility from the ICRC to the community. We provided a 2-day training session on financial management and the technical components of operation and maintenance. Now the community members are practically learning how to manage their own water yards. According to the credo, you're responsible but not alone. The ICRC continues to monitor the development of the projects and provide support whenever needed. This includes refresher training courses and facilitating exchange between the different communities on how to manage their water yards. The good management of a water yard, of a solar-powered water yard, is an opportunity for the community. They can engage in community-led projects that are funded by the income that they generate from the money, from the water that they sell. However, the main worry that we have is if the income that they generate will have the same value and if it's not eroded due to inflation. This is because the components that are likely to fail in a solar water yard, such as the pump, the control units, and the solar panels, should be replaced after a minimum of 10 years. You're now going to watch a video on the feedback of the use of solar water yards from Gudele Block 9 in Juba, South Sudan.
feedback from my community is positive. Most of them, they're happy. Now they are getting water in cheap price and very clean and very near to every person. In the beginning, we are getting water from stream water yard, and that water is not clean. It's dirty. It's having waterborne disease.
Especially these days in Juba, we have not recorded any cases of cholera outbreaks. Also, with the current COVID-19 pandemic, the solar-powered water yards ensure that communities have access to clean water that ensures hand hygiene. Hand hygiene is key to controlling the COVID-19 spread.
Melissa, we are back on the main screen.
Okay, thank you. So, in conclusion, we can see the benefits of the solar water energy. We can see the benefits of using solar energy for powering water yards from the video that we've just watched. There's increased access to water supply in terms of quality and quantity, the ability to promote hand hygiene for the COVID-19 response because of the availability of water, the positive social aspects that include the recognition and status of the community and its people. Looking at 2020, monitoring and evaluation will be the major component of the project. It will help us to understand what we've done well and what we can improve in the next projects. There are success stories and failures, and we should learn from both. Thank you, Rashina.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing with us your experiences. Now, moving forward, I would like to invite our last presenters for today, Jean-Baptiste Ziveri and Ayman Javeri. Jean is the president, co-founder of Renew Cheese, and Ayman is the project and study engineer, and together they are going to present the rapid assessment solar tool that they developed on behalf of UNHCR. So Jean and Ayman, please mute yourself and begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Anisha. I hope you hear as well.
Ayman, could you speak a little louder?
Okay, we're going to speak a little louder. Is it clear now?
Yes, it's clear now. Please go ahead with it.
So very nice to talk to you. This is Jean-Baptiste talking. I'll be first presenting the return of experiments and on the different feasibility studies that we've been browsing through with the UNICEF. So as for us, we are a non-profit organization. For those of us who don't know us, we gather high-level technical experts and devote our time to promote the access to the most efficient, sustainable energies that are available and develop partnership with NGOs. What we do mainly, it's about technical studies, so energetic assessment, technical studies, tenders assistance. In most cases, we work on solar pumping, but we can also work on other renewable. We are also build training sessions, and we are working at the moment with the UNICEF on IT tool design. And we really like to share our knowledge in such an event. Next slide, please. So considering our experience we had with the UNICEF, we have worked in 5 different countries on the dozen of solar pumping feasibility studies. And we've been working at the different steps of technical study for solar pumping, from water system assessment till works assistance. And we've encountered very various specificities, like from intake in rivers or boreholes, from very simple drinking water supply, like just one tank, one pipeline, one well, and sometimes very much complex with a certain number of wells and pipelines connected to each other. So from 5,000 to 50,000 people, it gives you an overview of the different kind and the different range of projects we have been working. Next slide, please. So our two key learnings from all those experiences is that first time, the long-term vision is quite complex because when you are looking at making a solar pumping project, you want the installation that lasts for 15, 20 years. And most of the time, it's very difficult to project yourself in a refugee camp in such a long time. So because there are volatile contexts. For example, in 2019, we wanted to go on in Niger for a mission of water assessment. It was not possible to the humanitarian crisis. Also point, the facilities are mainly built in emergency and not easy compatible with solar pumping. So we worked on Chad or Mauritania, and sometimes the water system is so complex that it's not easy to fit with solar. So please, our first advice will be the selection of the compatible camp is key and the compatible system. The second point is that the data collection is, in most of the case, very challenging. There is a high turnover of IPs and UNHCR people. The data archives is often an issue. We wonder about a camp in Cameroon, and after a few months after having put the report, we just understood that there was some data that were hosted by a previous partner, and they were not available when we organized the mission. And last, because we have to organize mission on the field to evaluate specific figures and to make a good evaluation of the cost, we encounter security and logistical issues. So sometimes it's beginning complicated. So our advice on this will be to enhance the EDM to support operational efficiency and project design. So EDM is electronic document management to help people design the best way the installation. Next slide, please. Okay, so thanks to those learnings, we have thought on a quick and easy to use tool in three major points. First one, facilitate data collection, as I've just said before. Avoid sticking to the pump manufacturer's tools because they target you their own product, and they don't take into account the complexity and the networks that you have, you may encounter. And then also try to get the best estimation, but the quickest way, and from people who are not as professional in hydraulics or solar. This was the main things that we thought it was structuring the tool we were working with the UNICEF. So considering this common experience, we decided with the UNICEF to build a tool to reply to this necessity. So next slide, please. So the objective of the rapid assessment solar tool that Ayman is going to show you is first give an easy access to the drinking water network thanks to an ergonomic interface. This will reply to the need to people who are not specialists to fill all the data that is needed. Then try not to reinvent everything because there is an existing borehole database in the UNHCR. So our main focus was to create a new database but was compatible with the existing one. Then simulate the solar potential and the cost of the works, of course, and deliver a report very easy to read with the main characteristic of the solar pumping potential. I let Ayman proceed and let's give you an overview of the database.
So thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna have a few words about this rapid assessment solar tool and mainly how it works first. So it was designed for UNHCR WASH officers on the field that have the credentials and the power to collect data from the field and upload it towards the UNHCR servers. So it will be done through an ergonomic UI that will help upload the necessary data with possible a communication protocol with the existing databases, and a background working calculus core that will generate a report. Said reports will be public on the GIS portal as soon as they are generated. So on the next slide, we will see the main inputs and outputs of this kind of tool. So first of all, we will use weather data, meaning solar irradiation and temperature data that will not be provided by the user, but it will be taken from an outside source. The user will have to provide data about the hydraulic network in his camp and the installed equipment, because we are targeting mainly existing camps in order to rehabilitate them and to install solar power to these camps. And data about the distribution profiles, the water distribution profiles, will be assumed by the calculus core, so not to overburden the user with lots of data inputs. So our background calculus core will be able to give as an input the solar potential, the amount of water that is produced via solar power with respect to produced by the camp, an estimation of the cost and the cost efficiency in order to have a better view of the resources needed and where best to direct the UNHCR and the UNHCR resources, and at last we will have an estimation of the CO2 impact in order to have an ecological impact of the project at hand. So the next slide will be a quick view of the UI and it's the way it is built. So we aimed to build a UI that is very simple with very few inputs at each page or each view, as we call them. So first view will be a global assessment of the project, in which the user will have to enter a name, a location, and a population that will need water. So on the next slide, we will see a pump. We will see the pump view, in which the user will be able to enter key figures about as many pumps as is needed or as is present in his camp. So we have types of pumps with key figures and key characteristics of pumps, pumping rates, depths of pump, electric power, etc. So this will allow us to have a flexible tool that does not just focus on simple networks. So the next slide will be a view of the water source view, in which the user will be able to enter data about the water sources. Will be boreholes, rivers, source captures, etc. So the key data will be the drilling depths, the water levels, static and dynamic, and the nominal source flow. So again, same as with the pumps, we can add as many as necessary in this context. So on the next slide, we can see that not only new data can be used, but existing data from the UNHCR database, provided the user has the credentials, can be loaded into this tool. So it's a way for us to value the data previously acquired by UNHCR. So next slide will be about the power sources. Panels, will it be solar, generator, or hybrid? It is about the power that powers the pumps and the hybrid and the solar or hybrid networks. So next slide will be about the storage points, which were not present in the previous UNHCR databases. So we had to add that in order to complete the information. And the next view will be adding singularities or nodes to the network. So we have a broader view possible of the network, and it allows us to assess complex networks and complex installations. So the last slide of the UI will be a summary that will happen after the pipe view, which I didn't show here because it is quite long to explain. So at the very last of the data input, the user will have a feedback to in order to have a quick feedback and assessment of his network. So at this step, the calculus score will take place and will provide us with a report that is visible on the next slide. So the report generated by this tool will be 2 pages long. First page is a summary of input data in order to present the context, the number of water sources, about the number of water storage points, and a quick view of the structure of the hydraulic network. The second page, which is what is needed from this tool, will be the output figures. So there is a line about solar figures, which are the first line is about solar figures. So it is about the peak solar power to be installed and the solar share for each pump. A line about water volume figures, amount of waters produced each day under scenario. A line about fuel figures will also be available, and a quick economic overview with a ballpark of the investment and the payback time. So to conclude, we have built for UNHCR a flexible tool that will allow us to assess potential to solarize existing camps and existing installations. And thank you for your time, and don't hesitate if you have questions.
Thank you, Ayman and Zine, for your presentation. And now moving forward, we are going to the Q&A session. Thank you for sharing, sending us all the amazing questions. And I do see there are more coming in. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first first question. The first question is about how do you ensure groundwater management so that there is no overpumping of water? So this question, maybe Asinat, Melissa, and Sylvia, you can share about from your individual projects, how do you take care of not overpumping of groundwater? And Sylvia, in this case, because Sylvia is gone, Fiona, maybe you could talk about especially in Yemen's case, where groundwater is a scarce resource. So let's start with Fiona, and then we go to Asinat and Melissa.
Hi, yes, so just to talk about the groundwater, what we are increasingly doing is making sure that before we drill a borehole, that we have done a comprehensive water resource analysis to make sure that we understand the water resources, the quality and the trends, and that we have accurately estimated the sustainable yield, both currently and incorporating also future demand and future water level changes. In many of our large programs, we also installed data loggers to record the changes in water level as well as the conductivity. And we are also, for example, in Zaatari, we have Zaatari camp in Jordan. We're also responsible for the production of all of the water to the camp as well as in Rukban. But basically, also we have lots of measures to ensure that water is being conserved. And this includes also messages with the communities about how to conserve water, as well as ensuring that whatever water we use is also being maintained. In Yemen, as far as I remember, there was one system that did have an issue with water levels, but that was due to much lower recharge, but the pumping was suspended. UNICEF is currently updating its environmental and social safeguards. So the proper yield assessments, as well as continuous groundwater and groundwater quality monitoring, is being included in that for all major projects going forward. That's it from our side. Over.
Thank you. Next we have Melissa. Do you want to share something from your project? Melissa?
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you, Ranisha, for that question. So in essence, we carry out a pumping test to confirm the quantity of the water that's coming from the borehole. And then when we design the pump, we design so that it does not extract more than 70% of the flow rate of the borehole. This is important for the fact that even during summer, the flow rate in a bore reduces. So if you extract too much water, you also put at risk of damaging the pump that you've installed. Another issue is based on the data that we collected for the map, you can also check the distances between boreholes so that you make sure that boreholes are not they're not close to one another, a minimum of 100 meters between the boreholes so that you're not fighting for the same water in the same aquifer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then moving to Asina, do you want to add something to that?
The only thing I can add is regarding the tank sizing, because when it comes to solar pumping applications, you're only able to pump water during sun hours. And so if the tank is not correctly sized, you'll have the tank filling up very quickly and water overflowing and being wasted, which can lead to a lot of unnecessary pumping and over pumping and really wasting a lot of water. So the tank needs to be sized correctly based on the output from the borehole and probably the usage patterns of the users. Over to you, Ranisha.
Sorry, perhaps Ranisha, if I can just add, just to highlight, as Sylvia mentioned, we're developing a manual on solar in conjunction with water emission, and just to highlight that estimating the yield is a very important component of this manual. Thanks.
Thank you. Asmit, actually, I want to come back to you because I do have another question for you. It's about operation and maintenance, and how do you ensure that operation and maintenance are done beyond the project duration, and who owns the system after project has to phase out?
I guess this really varies from context to context, because if it is in a camp setup, the management is still with probably the implementing agency or the managing agency, given the role of managing the solar pumping system. So O&M in that case is much easier, because then if, for example, Oxfam is managing the system in a refugee camp, then we'll probably have funds set aside to make sure that the system is running, there is no downtime, and there is money to repair in case there is a problem. Then if you're looking at a rural context, you might have a situation where and in many cases, this is actually the situation, is that the system is handed over to the community through a wash community, what you commonly call a wash co. And then usually agencies or wash organizations will train this wash committee in the daily operation and maintenance of this system. So they will hand over the system to the wash committee, train them on operation and maintenance, and hand over everything, including issues such as what happens when there's a problem, who do you call, what is the warranty on the equipment, and how do you follow up that warranty. So a complete handover procedure is done from the implementing organization to the community. Over to you.
Thank you. Melissa, do you want to add something from your own project that you just shared with us today regarding operation and management?
Thanks, Ranisha. Basically, what we noticed was that if you try to introduce operation and maintenance after you hand over the water yard, there was less interest. So we'd always try before we start the project to talk to the communities, understand from them based on their experience why in their past when their hand pump was working, why it wasn't working. So we basically start working with the community from the time we have an idea to install a large water yard, so that by the time that it's installed, you have the committee created, you know how much they're going to be charging for the water. They understand what operation and maintenance is, what are the components that fail, when do they fail. So this also ensures that when you hand over the water yard, there's a lot of community engagement.
And just a follow-up to that question, Melissa, is when you are having this water community, did you also have to take special precautions or special measures to ensure that the women or disadvantaged groups are also included as part of this community?
Actually, what happened was the design that we made was based from meeting a community called Gudele Block 9. So they had a water community management system that was working, and we replicated
Okay, thank you so much.
With the other communities. And by talking to the community, you can actually already see that they prefer to have women in charge. One of the comments that they made was, it's better to have women in charge of the water committee because they don't move from one place to another. They're not going to move to Uganda to look for work. They're going to be in the community, so they're better managers. So already by working in the community, they understand themselves that it's better to work with women than it is with men.
Thank you. Now I want to move to Jean and Ayman. And the question is, what database does the rapid assessment tool draw from, especially for cost estimation? And also the cost, are they full life cycle cost?
Yeah, so mainly the costs that we take into account is the capital expenditure costs for the project installation and for the installation of the solar panels and all of the equipment necessary. We also add we don't add a proper cost of maintenance because it is so difficult to assess from country to country, but we can recommend a time frame of manpower needed for installation, and the source of this data is our previous experience as well as recommendation, both from our contacts with pump manufacturers and with other NGOs that have done the same amount of the same work that we are recommending. And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And also a follow-up question to that question would be, is the tool also available for other humanitarian workers, or is it only available for UNHCR?
Right now, the tool is for UNHCR because it is designed and kind of ordered by UNHCR. UNHCR is the kind of client on this project, but the tool has the capacity and the flexibility to be developed for other contexts and other needs. So it is open to modifications in that.
Thank you so much, Ayman. So people, if you're interested, do get in touch with Ayman and Jean after this webinar to know more about the tool. And moving forward, I want to come back to Asinet, and the question to you, or in Oxfam to you in general, is: are you currently working only with grant model? And if not, if there are not any grant funding available, what are the different other financing models that you operate with?
Renisha, I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you just repeat it?
Yes, sorry, sure. So the question is, are you currently working only with grant models? And what are you doing if there is no grant funding available for the projects?
For the projects that we are implementing, is that question directed to Oxfam or to the Global Solar Water Initiative?
It's directed to Oxfam.
Okay. Yeah, I think currently we are working mainly with funding to implement projects. So whether it is in camps or rural communities, but we have also done other models that are based on results, what we call the results-based financing, which we have piloted in Kenya. So I'm sure my question is not very comprehensive at all, so I apologize for that. But probably the person who has asked can also get in touch, and I can be able also to get in touch with my colleagues across countries to be able to answer that question better.
Definitely, we will forward you. We'll request the person to get in touch with you directly and follow up with you after this webinar. Then moving forward, I have a question for Fiona. So we talked about the total harmonic distortion. Sylvia talked about in the presentation. So maybe could you explain it one more time, and then I have another follow-up question to that.
Sure, but perhaps before I answer that, maybe just to add into the previous question about financing, is that UNICEF is looking, I mean, we have historically focused on grant funding for our projects, including solar, but also general WASH projects. But we are increasingly looking at alternative models which would involve co-financing with the private sector in terms of increased efficiency, of increased water and energy efficiency for utilities. We haven't implemented this, but we are speaking to a number of different entities where we have flagged that grant funding isn't an option for various reasons. So what are the different options as well? So that's what we are looking at as well. So just to talk about THD. So so this is beyond my technical realm, but I believe that there is it happens when there is interference when, sorry, as Sylvia mentioned, the solar capacity for Gaza is not sufficient to run the whole system alone using solar. So it has to be supplemented either using the diesel generators or the electricity. And what we found was that there was interference on the system and reduction in the efficiency when when we were pumping using both the solar and the diesel generators together. So it was causing a reduction in the efficiency of the system. I'm not sure that problem has been completely resolved. I think we are looking at using different filters to try to reduce the impact of it, but it is still there. So I'll be very curious to hear if other agencies have encountered the same problem. Over. Thanks.
Thank you so much. If Asenath and Melissa, do you want to add something to that? Please do. If not, we go forward to the next question.
Nothing from me, Melissa.
Nothing as well, Ranisha.
Superb. So maybe then we go forward to a question that is addressed to everyone. And the question is, are there situations when energy storage is included in the solar wash systems? And if yes, what are the advantages and challenges of including batteries? So maybe we can go with Melissa, Asenath, Sylvia.
Sorry, Ranisha, may you please repeat the question? I didn't manage to hear it.
Yes, the question is, are there situations when energy storage is included in the solar wash systems? If yes, what are the advantages and challenges of including batteries?
No, in the solar systems that we have, we didn't include batteries.
Thank you so much. Asenath?
They're more expensive, so it increases the cost of the solar water yard.
Thank you. Asenath?
Yeah, I agree with Melissa because, yeah, apart from the fact that they are expensive and increase the cost of the capital cost of the system, they also introduce a recurring cost because batteries, the common technology that is used right now is short, it has a short life. So every 5 years you need to replace the batteries. I know there are other batteries that are now being used that have a longer life, but still that it still doesn't make sense to have batteries being replaced every, whether it's 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 years. The other thing is that you would actually need a very large battery bank to be able to power a large solar pumping system. It has found the use of batteries has been used in very small systems that require maybe 2 solar panels with maybe a battery or 2. But when you're looking at large pumping schemes that are the most common in our context, then they don't make sense. They are expensive, they have a short life, they also introduce inefficiency. So what we actually preach is instead of storing energy in a battery, you'd rather invest in a long-lasting water tank. Then you're storing water instead of storing energy, and water will be available from the tank when it is needed. Over to you.
Thank you. Sylvia, sorry, Fiona, do you want to add something to that?
No, just very similar to what Asenath has just mentioned. Most of our systems, we don't have batteries. In fact, exactly the same. We have gone for increased storage capacity as well. I know that in Gaza, there was also the issue with, because it was done in different phases and it was never conceptualized as being a solar-powered desalination system from the start, there was issues with access to space as well. So that was one of the other factors. But for most of our systems, yes, we just use expanded water storage rather than batteries. Thanks.
Thank you. Jean and Ayman, do you want to share something from your technical experiences on this question?
Yes, we share the same thing, thing that everyone says. I mean, batteries they imply, I mean, waste management. They are very short lasting and more. I mean, there is another thing that is complex for us, because when you want to buy a battery, you want to find it local and you want it long lasting. So it's difficult to find it on the market when you build a solar pumping design in a rural area. So we think for all those points, it's not necessary, and even more, it's giving it's making the installation even more complex. So it's not suitable.
Thank you so much. My next question is again addressed to all the speakers, and it is about remote monitoring offered by solar powered systems. So if you have if you could speak about the opportunities and challenge of remote monitoring, especially in case of solar power systems that you have gathered from your own experiences. So maybe we go with Ayman, if you have something to add to that.
We have not proper experience.
Sorry, Ayman, you are very. We lost your voice, so if you could repeat that again.
Okay. From our experience, there are only few installations that has the chance to get such monitoring. But in fact, as we work in Europe, in different industrial sites, we have this knowledge that is more spread with people able to connect and also program the different monitor systems. And what we find hard to find in African and sub-Saharan countries is to find the workforce able to program and make those systems work for long term. So that's why we are not focusing on this. And last part, there are a lot of people operating the different sites, and they are able to look at the functioning of the system and able to collect data on the field. And it's better that, for our point of view, it's better to make people have better knowledge and yes, and have more competence, more ability to detect problems and to be able to analyze the efficiency of the system. So it's better that we keep an eye on this and have some people have a look and the people which are local.
Thank you, Ayman. Asini, do you want to share your experience with working with remote monitor, if you have made any?
Yes, we from the point of the solar project, we have seen organizations that are using remote monitoring to monitor solar pumping systems, and this is an added advantage of the current technology of solar pumping, because it gives you that possibility to be able to monitor the system remotely. Within Oxfam, we have also used this functionality to monitor systems, and we have actually been able, in some cases, to optimize operation of the systems by monitoring the performance and actually making changes from the comfort of our desk. Because remote monitoring, you are able to monitor the system from far distances. It gives the advantage of being able to not just monitor the operation to see when there are problems, but you're also able to monitor long-term patterns with the water levels and changes in the aquifer levels and all that. So yes, it is a possibility, and definitely something that is useful and very relevant for pumping systems.
Thank you. But have you had any specific challenges with remote monitoring in your own work experiences?
I wouldn't say, from a technology point of view, I wouldn't say there have been any challenges, because probably I could say that the technology, when it comes to solar pumps, works with specific technology. So it depends on the solution that you apply. If you apply a technology that is tied to a manufacturer, then it means if you're using a different pumping solution and you have a different pump and you have a different controller, you might have challenges with compatibility. Or if you're using a hybrid system, you'll only be able to monitor the system when it's running on solar, and you won't be able to monitor the system when it's running on generator. That's one of the challenges I've seen. Yeah, I wouldn't say there has been a lot of challenges with it.
Thank you so much. Melissa, do you want to add anything to that from your own experiences? If you had made
we are aware of the fact that you can do remote monitoring, but at this point we haven't started to implement it. We think in the future, when you have more and more solar powered water yards in urban contexts like Juba, then it will become necessary.
Thank you so much. And Sylvia, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So I think we are not doing it consistently, but certainly a number of our countries are doing it. I'm familiar with the case in Jordan. It's actually for remote monitoring of a wastewater treatment system using, it's powered by solar technology, but it's not a borehole. So that has been operational for about a year. We have another site which is in desperate need of remote monitoring. It's basically the Rukban borehole production area in the northeast of Jordan. It's in a closed military area. There's no telephone signals. There's no data access. Options are just via radio signals. So we are looking with some enterprises to see how we can have remote monitoring through on radio frequencies, because our team are based outside. So if there's an alarm, because basically at one stage there was 100,000 people there, and in summer it gets up to 40 degrees, and our water supply was the prime supply. So that was an area where we definitely need it. So I think we have to be looking at a range of technologies to suit the different contexts. Over.
Thank you so much. I think that also brings us towards the end of the webinar, and we have getting a lot of questions about the presentations and the recording. We will share with you the recording and the webinar, and we'll share a link where you can download both of them, and they both will be uploaded to Energypedia, to the webinar documentation page, where you can have a look at all the past webinars too. And also, I want to reiterate that this webinar is facilitated by the Global Plan of Action for promoting knowledge exchange and sharing in the humanitarian energy nexus. So do check out the LinkedIn groups, where we are going to have a poll after this webinar to see if there is a need for deeper diving in some of the topics. And I know that we haven't managed to answer all of your questions, so we will try to forward them to the speakers and try to upload them afterwards to Energypedia, where you can read them later on. So I want to close this webinar by first saying a big thank you to all our presenters for your amazing presentations. I'm pretty sure we all learned a lot, and we really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, you see the link for the webinar documentation, which will also be shared in a follow-up email. And thank you so much, and do stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. And once again, thank you and have a good day.
Nisha.